to start off, I guess I'd like to ask before you do, why deploy software-defined data center? Why should a company move towards it? Or take your pick on the question. What is it? Why is it important? Or really, what is it? Yoram, why don't you start off? Why should companies even care about thinking about SDDC?
Well, it's a very good question. So if you look at the relatively short industry computing, as it is for the last 50 years, there was always this separation of having the data center built out of three components: compute or server on one side, storage on the other side, and networking as a third element. Mm-hmm. And they were mostly what we can call today hardware defined, in the sense that each one evolved independently by developing better, faster, more efficient boxes. I think the idea of software defined started actually on the server side with server virtualization, which you can call software defined servers.
Right.
And this actually enabled a new way to run your infrastructure rather than on physical boxes, on more logical entities. So the idea of a virtual machine is you don't need a physical hardware to run your application. You can run it on a virtual machine the same way you can run it on hardware, and that really enables you new level of automation, simplicity, and efficiency. And I think what software-defined storage is really taking this concept with the two other entities, network and storage, and making it all combined together to give you a much more efficient, much more scalable data center. Maxta pitch is basically working on the storage side to provide software-defined storage.
Daniel, what's your sense? I mean, why should companies even start to think about SDDC? Why should it matter to them?
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with everything Yoram said. I think that what happens when you move into software defined, both at the level of a specific part of the stack, like networking or storage or server, you get some pretty impressive tactical benefits. Generally, you have higher utilization, you have more control over the life cycle of the element, the resource, and you can increase automation around that, all of which are really important. But then there's a strategic benefit. When you've gone to that higher abstraction of software defined, when you're no longer tied directly to the hardware through virtualization and other techniques, you get a strategic benefit of now being able to move an entire workload that includes the storage, the network, and the server. And this starts to get at what has really been the nirvana or holy grail of operations. They want to be able to choose where and how they spin up not just resources that contribute to the support of a workload, but actually the entire workload. And this is where we'll perhaps get to that promise of hybrid cloud and being able to move in complete, full working order, a workload from dev to test to operations. So there's a strategic benefit here when you go software defined, as well as tactical benefits about utilization, lower cost, and automation within them.
As you were speaking, I thought of, I imagine myself as a typical IT manager, and I heard you talking about the value of the abstraction, and it's somewhere in there it sounds like, gosh, this has gotten significantly more complicated than the old, quote-unquote, old-fashioned hardware system. It sounds like you're going to need personnel that is more skilled, and maybe there's more that can go wrong in terms of the software itself. I know we're a slight tangent. What's your sense of that, Dana?
I don't know if that's the case. What's harder is when you have to integrate all of these elements because they stand alone. They're from different platform eras or different vendors or different standards approaches, so that the integration every step of the way is already complex and then gets sometimes exponentially more complex when you try to modernize or be agile with changing your underlying assets. So to go software defined might be a hurdle organizationally, culturally, skills, but I think it frees you up from the hassles of enterprise integration that we've been suffering for 20 years.
Alessandro, agree, disagree? I mean, why should a company move into this, and why is it important?
Yeah, no, first of all, I mean, trying to add to what Dana and Yoram already said is definitely, I completely agree, but I think you asked at the beginning, why now? again, I actually live and try to make products out of networking, but what I'm seeing is a trend that now is a perfect moment, or there's sort of a perfect storm brewing, because the hardware is getting to a point where we have commoditization spreading fast across all layers of the stack. I can say the guy here invented Ethernet, but look at, we have the storage gentleman here. Fiber channel is moving over Ethernet, or fiber channel is moving to direct attached storage. So the massive disruption in the storage, the way storage is consumed. The same is true in networking, right? The traditional monolithic, vertically integrated vendors are disappearing. Now you have to look at what Facebook has done to unlock the entire ecosystem. We have started, but we are seeing now the seeds for 3-5 years down the line, a completely different way of consuming the network as well. And then, of course, compute started the revolution 10 years ago. But the point here is that there's a confluence of trends in the industry at the platform level, which now are unlocking the possibility of deploying software on a uniform and diverse sort of Lego block type of infrastructure, where customers are free to pick and choose commodities out of any hardware shop or manufacturer in Taiwan. So this is a fundamental trend of why now, because now fundamentally we have the platforms on top of which this software can reside on. The other thing is, I would just want to make a comment that the customer we're talking to, again, we have a small company, so we're talking to the customer interested in virtualization technology, and those are the cloud providers, some enterprises. Everybody's looking for ways to, in the end, to hit their bottom line, and in the end, have operational savings and capex savings. So SDDC makes sense if and only if it provides this ultimate benefit of dramatically reducing cost. And personally, maybe I'm going to be a little bit more challenging or throw some polemic here in the discussion.
Polemic? We're always fond of polemic.
Yeah, no, not every technology probably is going to really save you money to build SDDC. So OpenStack is probably going in that direction. I'm not sure alternatives are going in the same direction. It would be interesting to hear what the other people think on the economics of moving to SDDC.
Greg, what's your sense? I mean, what is this thing called software-defined data center? And I think it's interesting, Alessandro's comment about the commoditization of hardware. I mean, this is a heartbreak of hardware vendors. It seems like that's certainly one of the things driving this. But why now, and what is it?
Well, I mean, there's several different themes here, and everything said so far, yeah, it's spot on from an industry standpoint. It's that's the industry narrative. But then there's the other narrative, the other conversation, which is customer focused. But here, let's keep this in mind for a minute. You can't have hardware without software. You can't have software without hardware. And the whole key is, how can you define the hardware? How can you define the software, the hard products, hardware, software? How can you define those to derive more business value? Whether that's cost cutting, whether that's taking out OpEx. A lot of people focused on CapEx, but they really need to start focusing on the OpEx. But what it really gets down to is that for some, this whole software-defined era is new and revolutionary. For others, it's a huge deja vu if you peel back the industry rhetoric, the industry narrative about leveraging new, because both hardware and software have become commoditized. How are you going to define those to map them to an environment? To the customer, you mentioned, when I talk with the customers, you mentioned software defined. Outside of those who are on the bandwagon, have their new favorite company, generally, if they're polite, they'll kind of look at you funny. Otherwise, their eyes roll. Because, on the other hand, if I say, well, what do you think about software-defined networking management, software-defined data center management, software-defined storage management, they lean forward and they're like, well, what do you mean? What aspect of management? What does that encompass? And that all of a sudden starts to open up the dialogue, because we've had software-defined networking for decades. We've had software-defined storage for decades. We've had software-defined servers, virtualization for decades, but they've been proprietary approaches or using proprietary type technologies. The key right now, and this is what I think the big breakthrough has to become, is to articulate, instead of the industry, us talking to each other, articulate out to the bigger population of people is this value prop of software defined is more than software defined marketing, that it's really about the management, unlocking the value of the hardware, unlocking the value of the software, unlocking the value of the cloud, removing barriers as opposed to creating new barriers.